The following is a presentation of the St. Louis Chess Club.
Welcome everybody, it is already time for round 7 of the 2022 Spring Chess Classic. I am Grandmaster Alejandro Ramirez here at the studio in St. Louis with my good friend, Grandmaster Cristian Chirila, as we are ready to take on the last third of the tournament.
Alejandro, always a pleasure to be here in the beautiful studio here at the St. Louis Chess Club doing commentary on these exciting games. These players have given us so much excitement for the past 7 days.
Absolutely, and tell us a little bit about how the tournament is going, who's running away with it, and who surprised you?
Well, let's look at the standings. We're going to start with the standings in Group A. In pole position, we have Ray Robson, who is having an amazing event. He drew yesterday's game and is leading with 4.5 out of 6. Tied for second position is Sam Sevian and Ilya Nishnik. Aram Hakobian in sole fourth position. He lost yesterday against a surging Sam Sevian. He has 3.5 points, and tied for fifth position, we have a pack of 3 wolves: Jeffrey Chong, Darius Vierch, and Hans Nieman.
Yeah, and Alex Lunderman a little bit luckless in the tournament, but finds himself with 2 points after finally winning a game. Misha Antipov, however, scores his third draw of the tournament, moves to 1.5. And Kamil Dragun, he was the luckless victim of Lunderman yesterday and finds himself also with 1.5. Let's take a look at Group B, in which Chris Repka is the clear leader.
Oh, absolutely. Chris is just simply dominating the event so far. Yesterday, he escaped with a draw. Nevertheless, he was on the back foot against the experienced Elshan Moradiabadi, but he managed to salvage a draw. In second position is a surging Abhimanyu Mishra. He won 4 games in a row, Alejandro. That is an amazing result for the youngest grandmaster in history. Christopher Yu lost his game yesterday and is in sole third position with 3.5 points. Elshan Moradiabadi and Sam Kanin tied for fourth position with 50%.
Right, and Robert Hungaski, who is the rating favorite of the tournament, a little lucky yesterday to actually score that full point against somebody else that has 50%, Titus Tarmavicius, from a completely winning position. Titus just played the wrong move order, ended up down a piece, wasn't able to find his stride. Meanwhile, we have JJ Alimarandi, Arman Mikhailian, and Harshid Raja with his first win of the tournament, joining there at 2 points. The tournament format is very simple. We have 2 10-player round robins for you. It's a classical chess here at the St. Louis Chess Club, 90 minutes for 40 moves, an extra 30 minutes for the remainder of the game, and we have a 30-second increment from move 1.
Also, the players are not allowed to mutually agree to a draw in less than 40 moves. This is going to ensure that we're going to have a very combative event here at the Spring Chess Classic. And how about the schedule, Alejandro?
The schedule is also simple. It's 1 round a day here at the St. Louis Chess Club. We start at 1 p.m. every day, except for round number 9. That is the last round. We start 2 hours early, not only over the board, but also here in the commentary booth, as we will start our commentary at 1:30 p.m. Central, as opposed to the usual 3:30 p.m.
And don't forget, guys, join the discussion on social media. You can actually reach us on Twitter, where we are very active. We're going to see your questions if you send them to #SpringChessClassic. Also, this broadcast is on YouTube, but also on Twitch. Tell us a little bit about that, Alejandro.
Absolutely. For every $75 that we receive in donations, subs, bits, it doesn't have to be one donation specifically. We can add them up. For every $75, we're able to give a child, a student here, a full semester of chess programming. That means that they're going to be able to attend lectures, become better chess players, understand the game. And remember, this is an important stepping stone all the way from the scholastic level to the super elite. We have it all here at the St. Louis Chess Club, but we couldn't do it without your help.
We are in round number 7, so let's take a look at the pairings. We're going to start with Group A.
And Kamil Dragun is playing against Sam Sevi, and Jeffrey Chong has not had the form that he usually has in these Spring Classics, playing against Alex Lunderman. Actually, that game has already finished in a draw. Mikhail Antipov is playing against Hans Nieman. Darius Vierch playing against Ilya Nishnik. That would really be a candidate for game of the day if we didn't have this great matchup between Aram Hakobian, who goes to Webster University, and Ray Robson, who's been leading the tournament, playing scintillating chess, taking advantage of all these opportunities that his opponents are giving him. Particularly, I can remember the game against Misha Antipov, where we just pretty much gave the game up for a draw, and out of nowhere he was able to find some pressure, put his opponent in some trouble, and ended up converting that position. Meanwhile, in Group B, we have the matchups of Harshit Raja versus Sam Hanin. Abhimanyu Mishra, the youngest grandmaster in not only the event but the entire world, is playing against Elshan Morgadebadi. Titus Ramavicius is playing against Armin Mikhalian. JJ Ali Marandi playing against Robert Hungaski in a really fun game so far. We'll probably take a look at that one quickly. But we have to start with the game of the leader. Chris Repka has been scintillating. He was able to salvage half a point yesterday in a completely lost position against Elshan and must find some confidence there. He's playing against Christopher Yu, who certainly is vying for first place, but being hit with a loss yesterday could not have felt good. Cristian, tell us, where do these two players stand right now?
Well, I have to tell you, Alejandro, this battle is as exciting as it can get. The battle between Chris Repka and Christopher Yu. This is in group number B, the clash of the titans. And Chris Repka started off with knight to f3. We've seen him start with d4 and c4, but his main weapon is the reti. With knight to f3, g3, bishop to g2, fianchettoing the bishop and keeping a lot of flexibility in his position as white from the early on stage. Knight to f3, d5, g3, c5. Very aggressive approach by Christopher Yu. We've seen Christopher actually, in general, after knight to f3, he tends to respond with the move knight to f6. He delays this idea of d5, potentially keeping d6 and the type of King's Indian structures in his pocket. But in this instance, he decides to go directly with d5, a very direct approach. g3, c5, taking the center as soon as possible. Bishop to g2, knight to f6, castle e6. This is a very typical approach nowadays. Of course, white can try to go with an immediate c4, but that's going to allow black to play the move d4 and create this reverse Benoni type of structures. Let's see how white decided to play b3. That's another approach. Of course, as I was mentioning earlier, white has a lot of flexibility in this position. b3 is one of the ways in which you can play. c4 is another one. d4 is also a move in the position and try to play some sort of a reversed Grunfeld. Nevertheless, if you want to get the reverse Grunfeld, you should probably wait for black to develop the knight to c6. So for example, if white plays this move b3 and then knight to c6 would come on the board, now d4 is an option, because whenever we see this exchange on the board, black in general, without the knight on c6, would be very happy to see this move on the board, targeting the knight on d4. And if white doesn't have this exchange available, knight takes c6, then his position becomes worse. He has to retreat with the knight. That's not good news. So instead of that, black played the move bishop to e7, once again preparing to meet this d4 with c takes d4. And now we see bishop to b2, castle c4. Finally, we're seeing a challenge for the pawn structure here in the center. c4, d4, e3, knight to c6, and now we have those type of reverse Benoni structures. Rook to e1, bishop to c5. Now bishop to c5 is clearly aimed at connecting the pawn structure with this move e5 and taking even more control in the center. That's why immediately white plays the move knight to e5, stopping that. Knight takes e5, rook takes e5, queen to d6. And now the battle is all about this important square on b5, but also about this expansion in the center that black wants to see on the board with the move e5. And this is exactly why we see this rook planted in the center, but also supported by the pawn on f4. And now we see this position all the way into this position. a lot of things have happened, but we have a lot of games also to keep an eye on. Right now, it seems like the position has simplified a little bit. We've seen that e5 come on the board. We see an exchange on b5. That white knight landed on b5. It was immediately chopped off the board. e5 is on the board, and right now it seems like black has more squares for his pieces. This knight is going to land either on f2 if you're not going to pay attention, but most likely on e3. This is a beautiful outpost, and we see that this is what knights love to have. Outposts, especially in your opponent's camp, and this is past the midline on e3, a very dangerous square for the knight. Not only that, but this knight on g4 is going to support a potential attack via the 6th rank. This queen is ready to jump to h6 and create an immediate checkmating threat. It seems like right now black is in full control of the game, and maybe Chris Repka is going to lose his first game in this event.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with this kind of structure, especially because I play them so often with the white pieces from a different move order, this kind of ready type of situations. But it feels that everything went wrong for him, and if we can pull out this game, actually I was going to pull up another, but I want to go back to that position of Chris Repka. There's a couple of things that look really nice for white, but there's a couple of problems that you run into in this particular structure when you misplace your pieces. This bishop on b2 sometimes is really good and sometimes it's really bad. And in this case, it's just an awful piece. You can see that it is attacking the pawn on d4, but it's such an easy pawn to defend. And the bishop is actually in the middle of all of the pieces. It's not, I'm not able to really coordinate my rooks. I probably want to have to play the move bishop c1 at some point. But it's not an easy move to make. It is a backwards move. It doesn't really contribute to the position that much. And even in a scenario where the knight comes to e3, it's not really clear that you want to chop it off with your bishop and give black a powerful pass pawn on the e3 square. I wanted to go very quickly around group B because I thought this was a very funny opening. This is actually a legit line which Ali Marandi is using against Hungaski. This is the Scandinavian, Team Scandi for all those Twitch people. Takes, knight c3, and of course queen d8, queen d6 has been all the rage, but queen a5 is still the main line. And the move b4 is actually a move. I think at some point it started as
Alejandro, this is your student.
This is my student.
Did you teach him this move b4?
No. This is general culture at St. Louis University. This is well known. I think this started off interestingly as a pre-move win on bullet games on ICC, where they actually played the move b4 because you play something else randomly with black pre-moving, and then you take on a5. But then people realized and put it on some real engines, and they thought, actually, this is not so bad. And some old games propped up, and people realized, oh, this has actually been an idea forever. And it revived. It revived at some point, and it's not so bad. Yes, you do give up a pawn seemingly for free. You do have this b file open. Is the b file really worth a pawn? Probably not. But you do keep kicking the queen around, and in some practical point of view, this is really unpleasant for black to play. That being said, it is a pawn. I think objectively black is supposed to be better, but it's easy to lose your path in this position, especially if you don't know what you're doing. And I have the feeling that JJ smelled the fish with Hongaski playing the Scandi. They didn't want to play a solid position and just kind of went for it. And I'm going to just fast forward a little bit to prove more or less the trouble that black can run into. This if not obviously prep, it's very close to preparation. White sacrifices a second pawn, but now the move bishop b2 takes on h8 is quite a real threat, because whenever you interpose with this check, I have bishop c3, and that's all good. So this is not going to be a little fun for white to play, and you have the initiative. You have the bishop coming to b2. The queen on e5 is the only developed piece that black has, and a lot of factors that the computers don't care about actually are very difficult to play with here. So after f6, I'm just going to speed through to what actually happened in the game. We eventually got to this position, and it feels to me that black is still very far from completing any kind of development. I'm a little curious about the move knight f2. But still, this knight on g8 is stuck, this rook on h8 is stuck. If anybody's better, it has to be white. I just don't know how much better he is. Like how much pressure you can put on this position.
Well, let's try to figure out some variations, Alejandro.
Yeah,
maybe
this knight
start with knight
f4.
Right?
Yeah, I think knight f4 is the most logical move. It attacks the queen, and it moves the knight out of the defense.
The main goal of Black's position right now is to get the knight to h6, probably landing on f7 to keep a defensive post,
Right.
and then connect the rooks. And I'm still 2 pawns up, right? So if you don't do anything before I can manage to do those 2 moves, I will be probably in a winning position as Black.
Yeah, I agree with you. So time is of the essence here for JJ. I think the move knight f4 is very nice because it attacks the queen, so I do have to move it. I cannot take on e7, it's still defended. I could play something like queen e4 or queen c4. I'm not really sure which way I'm leaning.
Maybe even c4.
Maybe on c4. The reason I didn't necessarily want to put it on c4 is because b5 might be a tempo. But on the other hand, what I like about moving the queen...
b5 I can take with the rook.
Oh, that's a very good point, Cristian. Sorry for missing that. Yeah, b5 I just take that. The queen is pinned.
That's why I put the queen on c4, because I'm anticipating a knight potentially landing on d5, and I want to have some ideas of maybe putting the rook on d1 and taking on d5. I don't know if it works. Of course, this is just fantasy at this point, and maybe you have to leave that c4 square free for the pawn to actually target the knight coming to d5.
Right. There's a lot of considerations, specific considerations that go into this position. The knight comes to f4, and it's already on f4 on the board as far as I can see.
It is, yes.
And the queen actually has a lot of squares, and it almost feels that every single one of them comes with some kind of hindrance. If you put it on c4, as you mentioned, Cristian, you don't have the push c4 kicking out the knight that we expect will land on d5. You put it on anywhere on the d file, you have to watch out for a tempo on d8. On f1, it's kind of passive. And the reason that I didn't necessarily want to put it on e4, which is probably the most logical square, is that I'm not attacking e1 with the rook. So Black could entertain the idea of going knight h6, sacrificing this pawn on e7 and trying to get this rook into the game.
No, but I'm getting too many pawns, right?
But the problem is that, yeah, once you take and you kind of have to cover, you don't actually finish your development. This rook takes on b7. You have this horrible pin on the 7th. And material is just even, right? I have gained enough pawns to equalize material.
That's the problem. Yeah.
Yeah, and strategically, you're still losing. It's not what Black actually hasn't fixed some of the more serious problems.
I think not only strategically, but you're losing by force, because whatever rook you put on f8, I'm going to go rook to d7.
Yeah, rook d7 wins. I think rook e4 also wins.
Rook e4, yeah.
This is always a check. Yeah. So it doesn't really matter what I do
Double
here.
attack.
Double attack. Actually, this one might not win because of this.
Rook b8, right?
Rook e8, yeah.
Or rook b8.
Or rook b8 also works.
Yeah.
So, but the move rook d7 as suggested by Cristian, attacking this rook, and then I take on f7, it's going to be checked. Seems to finish off the game. So, knight f4, we expect the move queen e4 now that we analyzed it for 2 seconds.
And after queen to e4, I'm going to play this move e5.
Yeah, this is probably the only try, right?
Yes. Again, I just want to get knight to h6 on the board. I will be very happy if I manage to do that. So how do you stop me?
How do I actually continue this attack?
That is a good question.
I mean, I know that JJ is starting to calculate stuff like bishop d6, takes,
oh my goodness.
But I think the king's very safe on f8 here, so I don't think this works at all. So I'm not sure, actually. How do you continue in this position?
Okay, so maybe queen e4 is not the right move.
Yeah, but it is the most logical, right?
It is.
I do like the queen there.
Okay, I have an idea.
Uh-huh.
What if you go queen to d2?
Yeah, queen d2 is also quite nice, right? You do manage to attack e7 with the rook. If you go e5, then maybe bishop d6
Bishop
works.
to d6, yes.
But what we have to calculate in this position is what happens if you first play the move rook d8, because it is a nasty tempo here against the queen.
And actually, Alejandro, can we show that bishop to d6, because I think it's quite important.
Yes.
Right now, queen to d7, first of all, doesn't work because I have the discovery check with bishop to f8.
That's even better. Rook takes e5.
But that was my, exactly. Rook takes e5 is the critical point with this bishop to d6, because after queen to f7, it looks like you're defending absolutely everything. But rook takes e5, and I think I'm breaking through.
Yeah, I think this starts to collapse for Black. You see this king is a little bit too weak. I'm going to pick up the knight next move, no matter what you do.
Like knight f6,
knight f6,
queen takes
I'll take
f4.
queen takes f4.
Yeah.
And I'm going to build up the pressure. I am no longer down too much material. It's only an exchange. And I feel that the threats come too quickly. Yeah, the king is just too weak, right, in general. I don't see what you can do about it.
It seems like a big moment right now for JJ.
Well, you know JJ, in big moments he just doesn't think. And he plays the move queen c4 almost immediately. That's the style of players, right? You see a lot of different personalities in this type of tournaments. I think you get used to the top players. You understand and analyze a lot of these things. But once you reach the lower 2500s, 2600s, you can see a lot more style come out. I feel that sometimes they don't play as correctly. They let their style shine a little bit more. And you can see it here with JJ, right? He plays very fast in these wild complications, doesn't really like to sit down and calculate which one is the most precise move, because he also understands the practicality of making a move and making your opponent think.
Well, also, let's look at the clocks, right?
Yeah.
It seems like Hungaski is down to his last 6 minutes.
This is not a fun position to play, much less on 6 minutes.
No, and Queen c4 does have a clear threat, and that is, of course, you probably will want to go something like knight d5, as we were mentioning, but that knight from f2, and that's why I think he played this move knight to f2. He wants to go back.
Yeah,
e4 or d3.
I'm not sure e4 or d3, but one of these two squares.
And then to c5. And then if I manage to land on e6, obviously that's going to have devastating consequences. So you have to defend against that. But do you play b6, which weakens your pawn structure even more, and then maybe I can invade with the rook on e6?
Yeah, this looks very ugly, honestly. This looks very, very ugly for...
Especially with less than 6 minutes on the clock.
Yeah, to be honest, I think this looks ugly even without without the time pressure. But with the time pressure, I'm not really sure how he's planning to hold this. Let's go around Group B real quick just to see what's going on. I feel we always start with Group B, and perhaps we shouldn't. But Sam Hanin here must be either... If this pawn on f7 wasn't so weak, I would say that he is almost winning because he is up a pawn. But there might be some tactics in the position. I have to calculate what happens on bishop d4. Then there's like, what does happen after bishop d4? It attacks this rook, it attacks this knight, the knight is holding onto the bishop. I want to go very quickly through the game, so I'm going to turn on the engine so I don't mess this up. No, the engine does say black is winning. Precisely because of this move, bishop d4, it's more or less key. It's also an obvious move. You hit the rook and you hit the bishop, and it forces this rook on a7 to an awkward square on d7, where I can later hit it with my own rook on b5. There's a discovery on this square, so I expect bishop d4, attacking this. The rook comes to d7, defending that, so that when I chop this knight, the bishop on d5 is defended. But here I can start thinking of trading pieces with rook c5 or move the rook somewhere, and the bishop will be attacking the rook in many variations. I'm actually a little surprised about the move rook c1 here. Feels like the move rook d1 was more or less necessary, after which white, I think, is still in the game.
Rook where?
Having a tough day here, Cristian. Having a tough day. All right, rook c1, therefore.
Actually, it's the only
move, yeah. That's the only move you can play.
Place it on.
Meanwhile, Titus Tarmavicius against...
I see a checkmate in 2 moves coming.
Yeah, this is a threat, huh?
Bishop d3 is a big threat, so you have to be paying a lot of attention to that.
Yeah, let me count the material first. White is up a pawn, and does have the better structure, but black has the pair of bishops and a strong initiative against this king, which I think is slightly weaker than this one. Not to say that the king on jade is doing is having a field day, but this will come down to calculation. As we mentioned, the move. Let's just put some move on the board. Bishop d3 check is a huge threat because now the queen and the bishop are connected on the b2 square, and that'll be checkmate next move, no matter how you respond to this check. So you have to do something, and the first instinct that I have is to stick something on e5, like the bishop. But then I see that f2 is hanging, and I'm wondering if I should defend it first.
No, I don't think you can defend it that easily.
I thought about rook d2, actually defends both here and here.
Yeah, rook d2 makes some sense. But now rook d8,
coming
with tempo maybe?
I am getting worried about some stuff. I'm not sure which rook, but rook d8 is kind of clever to play a rook.
That one.
Because this is not a check, so I still have bishop d3. That being said, I'm not really sure what you gain if I play this, but
bishop d3.
Bishop d3 check here.
Still bishop d3.
It's still bishop d3 because now I have to take with the rook. I cannot take with the queen because I lose it, but taking with the rook leads into checkmate. So for that reason, perhaps is that you have to stick something on e5, as mentioned earlier.
Which he did.
And he did, and Titus decides it's the knight that he has to stick there. I would have probably given some preference to the bishop, unless there were some tactical issues, but perhaps there were. The knight on e5 doesn't get rid of the pair of bishops, right?
No, but that is a very good question. Why not bishop e5?
Yeah, bishop e5 looks more logical, right? I'm not going that crazy today, am I?
No. I think bishop e5 makes a lot of sense. I think he was maybe afraid of bishop to c6. This is the only thing that I can think of.
This is the only reason you wouldn't play this move, right? Yeah, and perhaps there's some lines in which this bishop is lost. Actually, it's not even so easy to retreat the queen.
That's the problem.
Yeah, this queen doesn't have a lot of great squares. I don't want to go back to e1. But on e2, sometimes it gets tempoed, right? This is a tempo against the queen, and I have to take with the pawn. And at the very least, black is not worse. Here, it is probably just much better, actually, with some threats. Yeah, white has some counterplay. Perhaps better is an exaggeration, but black would have no problems.
And we do see, I believe, maybe bishop takes c5?
There was a move? No,
or queen takes f2.
Queen takes f2.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the melee here rages on. It's difficult to evaluate, but the instinct is the bishops are good. Bishop's good, knight's not so good, open position.
Rook to d2 was played, which makes a lot of sense.
It makes a lot of sense. You have to play rook d2. You cannot live with the queen on f2, and you cannot play rook f1, of course, because of the bishop on b5. So,
and the queen dropped back instantaneously.
Yeah, these guys are playing
to c5.
fast. c5, right?
I think he put it on c5, but I'm not 100% sure.
I know, he put it on b6. But both were logical options. I'm going to give black a very slight edge just because I like bishops. But knight on e5 might be good enough for equality. I would always take black here, though.
You would? Okay, interesting.
Yeah. It's my feeling that the lights, especially because these light scores are so weak, that I might be able to, if this bishop gets to d5.
Right.
Right. I mean, the game is kind of over.
That's the dream.
The game is kind of over.
And how do you get there?
I'm not sure. I'm also not sure what white's plan is. I mean, you can go g4, g5, but even after that, I'm not entirely sure how you make progress. So I'm a little bit on the stuck side. Let me finish up the group because we only have remaining the game of the Wunderkind, Abhimanyu Mishra. And what is going on here? Currently, white is up an exchange, but that will last exactly half
one
a
move.
The question is how much you're going to get for it. Okay, you have to defend the rooks. I don't really think it matters very much how you defend it.
Question is which rook?
It doesn't matter, I think. Let's
Sure.
just do one of them. I don't really have any better move than taking, so I'll take.
Look, I see two bishops. I like it. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so
the
black
thing
is a pawn.
Black is up a pawn. That's the only saving grace, right? If white had a pawn on e4, I think we could even start thinking about black having a decisive, white having a decisive advantage, because these bishops are monstrous and this bishop not so good. That being said, since we don't have that pawn on e4, it's not very clear to me what the evaluation of this endgame is. The main difference is not so much that you're down a pawn, but this knight on f6, when it lands there, will actually tether something to defending d5. For example, if I start with the move b5, and I really like the move b5 because, first of all, it defends against the immediate threat of bishop takes a6. It takes away the c4 square for the bishop on f1. And
I actually don't like the move b5 at all. I will take on b5 and then rook c2.
Yeah, I was hoping you would do this because here I think I have knight f6. And this was kind of my point, that when the rook leaves d2, I'm able to play knight f6, attack the pawn on d5. And what should
if
be
I go rook c7?
Yeah, rook c7. I think I interpose with the bishop.
Sure, and bishop a7.
And bishop a7. And when you're claiming that I'm not on time,
I think you're just one move away from finishing your setup.
Yeah, because I want to take on d5, but unfortunately this rook will be defended after bishop b8. And the point is that if I move away, you take, and this important move at the end, bishop c4, pins the knight against the king, and white ends up winning because the only way to defend it gives up a very important bishop. So perhaps I need to be a little more careful about this. b5, I still find it like the instinctual best move, but perhaps here I have to be a little patient and go rook b7.
I like that move.
Yeah,
it
covers the second rank. I don't have to worry about bishop a7 anymore. And the question for white is, how do you maneuver around to hit this guy? If you hit the guy, you will win, but it's not so easy. Perhaps for this reason, you actually go not rook c2, but rook a2. And you can see kind of the grandmaster process there, thought of process, right? You want the open file, you see the open file, you calculate a couple of variations, and then you think, actually, was the rook better on a different one? And I think it's better on a2 just for the reason that rook a5 will actually be hitting the pawn immediately. So for example, if I play rook b7 to guard against these threats.
But now there's no more bishop to a7.
That is very true. Now there is no bishop to a7, and perhaps because of all of these reasons that we're talking about, way back here, we realized that this rook on d2 is actually kind of silly. This rook on a1 is actually very important.
Now we're getting somewhere.
Now we're getting. Yes. Now it looks like we understand chess. He gives up not the D rook, but the A rook, so that when B5 comes, if B5 comes, I can take, take, and I will open up the rook for the 7th rank. And I think that if B5 is not playable,
Yeah,
you have to go
play b5 at this point.
You have to go a5, but that's pretty sad.
That creates the square c5 for my knight, though. So I'm quite happy with that aspect of this move.
That is true, but I'm wondering if you actually get there.
So king to e7.
King to e7, and then I wanted to play rook c7, rook c1. Control the file. Try to go as quickly as possible to the c7 square.
So I'm going to defend that. King to d8.
And then you go king d8. The thing I don't like about king d8...
It does feel like I'm hanging on by a thread. I'm not going to...
Right. This, especially because of this check, right? It's a surprising check. And it seems that you still have one move here. I'm not sure how to evaluate this. I have the feeling this falls apart,
this is completely lost.
Yeah, I have the feeling this falls apart somehow. I haven't figured out exactly how.
Well, I'm paralyzed, right?
You're completely paralyzed. And I think
you can just take on a5 and then bring the king all the way to b5.
Yeah, I actually think you win like that. You just put you take, put the bishop on c6. You cannot do anything but king e8, king
e7.
King e7. And this king literally will march all the way to b5, take that pawn and win.
And you also have to be very careful, because if you do try to push your pawns on the king side with h6, g5, now you create a different avenue for my king via the square f5.
Yeah.
So I will go king d3, king e4, king f5.
And then I'll pick up the king side, I'll pick up the queen side. This is completely paralyzed. This is very, very bad for black.
Maybe there's some sort of a study-like defense to this position for black, but...
Study-like win, maybe.
It doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, I don't think that black is holding. And because of this evaluation of the few lines that we looked at, it might be the case that black is doing very badly, because if you have to play rook a8 and give up the c file, you're in very dire straits, but you cannot give up a6 for free. This is not one of those positions where you can give up the pawn for free. So I really like Abimanyu's chances of scoring a 5th win in a row.
Wow.
Amazing. Let's see what the engine says, just because we have so many games. The engine says b5 equal. Oh, sure. Whatever.
b5 equal. Okay, let's try to understand it.
I don't even know why I turned it on.
So b5 equal, you take, right? You have to take on b5, open up the a file, rook a7, or rook a5. Which one do you go for?
You know, I'm actually scared of both. I'm not going to lie. I feel like I'm losing against both rook a7 with the pin and rook a5 with the...
I want to keep the king on f7, just because whenever a knight lands on d5, I will have this pin bishop c4. So let's start with rook a5. Knight f6, right? Is that the only move in the position, or?
Pretty much, right?
No, but then bishop takes b5.
I can't even take with the rook, honestly. Because, again, it's one of those scenarios where if you take on d5 and I go here and you go here, you can't do anything.
This is so sad.
You can't do anything. At the moment you push this, you lose the knight. So I'm just going to literally boom, boom, boom and take the knight.
Or bishop a7.
Or bishop a7 and promote the pawn for free. I mean, whatever. It's completely winning. So this is actually very sad. I am very confused. I mean, if I didn't click on the engine, we would have looked like magicians, like very smart. But apparently, knight f6.
So perhaps maybe just rook b7?
You actually just go rook c8 and the engine says it's equal. And this is beyond...
But from a practical perspective, this definitely doesn't feel equal.
I mean, it's not that it doesn't feel equal. It feels lost, right?
Completely lost.
Like you move the rook and the pawn promotes. And that's it. That's the game. You have a bishop on f8 that's not participating. The knight just moved out of the queen side. But engines are engines. Luckily, these are not engines playing, and I don't think I would ever go for the move b5 here. I would actually just hunker down and go rook a8, because I think b5 would lose by force.
But the problem with rook a8 is that now I get the c file.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you
of
also
course.
have two weaknesses that I can target. Both of those pawns are still on the board, and that is a big problem.
And I would say it's even 3 weaknesses, right? Because this 3 squares.
d6 as well.
D6
absolutely.
as well. But okay, the b5 equal is beyond my understanding. All right, let's move on to Group A. Camille Dragoon is playing against Sam Sevian. This is a huge mess on the board. What is the material count? White is up one pawn. But we have a mess on the board. Obviously, g5 is a testing move. You cannot take on g5, because after I take, remember it's check. Bishop takes g5, knight takes f3 at the end.
What? Knight takes f3?
Oh, knight takes knight takes f3. Bishop takes e4.
Okay.
And this is what I was trying to calculate, because you attack the rook and you
now I
attack
go bishop
the knight.
f4.
You go bishop f4, and
So you can get that
you
bishop back by taking on f3, but how is that endgame? Isn't that completely lost?
I never want to say completely lost when there's two rooks on the board as opposed to just one.
Rook
But,
c1.
but this is definitely not what black wants. So what is the point of g5? Takes is check, takes.
Well, it just feels like a desperado move.
Was this position that bad? Let me go
He's
back
a pawn
couple
down.
moves. Well, he is a pawn down and has a horrible position. So now you begin to understand where the desperation comes from. Perhaps he didn't see a better move than g5 because, yeah, actually, from the position before g5, it's quite obvious that white is a couple of moves away from consolidating fully and just taking the game. I mean, the bishop if you get bishop b2 and rook d1 in, that
Game is over.
That game is over. Yeah, you're up a pawn. You have the better king. You have the better structure. You have the better bishop. You have everything. So perhaps sensing absolute panic mode, Sam goes into the move g5, and queen takes g5 is definitely possible, but it's not necessary. The thing is, knight g2 allows g4.
And this is what I think Sam really wants.
Yeah.
He wants to weaken the light squares around the king and potentially land the knight on f3, and then he's going to be able to find some sort of compensation based on the fact that the bishop on a8 becomes a complete monster. So I'm going to try to avoid that at all costs. Let's go queen takes g5. I really want to exchange the queens. I want to take this game into a technical territory.
Yeah, and I think there's no good reason not to, right? The knight g2, g4 looks complicated, and this one looks like two resolves. The only move here is knight f3. If you don't play knight f3 here, then I don't know what this combination was.
Yeah.
You could actually consider taking with the rook, but I don't think it helps you, because instead of taking on g5 immediately, I think I do take on f3. And it feels like every single one of white's pieces is hanging in this position. I really don't think you can defend all of them.
No.
So you actually take with the knight first. And here we have options, because I could reverse the move order and take on f3 first. And I am actually a full rook down here, but I might also be winning a full rook, which would put me on even material and good ground. Am I missing something? Because if you defend either one of your rooks, I take the other one and take the bishop at the end. The bishop itself doesn't have anything to attack. I mean, you could go bishop f4, for example, and then take on c7. But
Okay, I do have an idea.
uh-huh.
So let's defend the rook on f3.
So with rook bf1,
Yes.
I take on f1,
I take back.
and I take here, and we get into this endgame.
Now, I have two islands of pawns as white. The one on the queen side, the one on king side. You have 4 islands of pawns. So obviously, from a technical perspective, white is doing great. Now, the question is, can I target those pawns? So let's start off with rook to c3.
Yeah, the problem is I think black is a bit too active in this endgame. I go rook c3, I go c5.
c5, yeah.
Important move.
And after rook to d3, you're going to cover up with rook d5, aren't you?
Yeah, I think I start covering my pawns. Honestly, I can start thinking of counterplay, but rook d5, and I don't think this endgame is lost. I do already have a passed pawn. I have the feeling that will force you to simplify the entirety of the queen side.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And maybe even black's pushing for
This
a win
rook
here.
takes f3 that you found, that was a nice blow.
It's easy to find moves when you have no alternatives.
Okay, so let's take. I feel like I have to take on f3. Right?
You take with the knight, right? You have to take with the knight. Rook takes. Okay, rook
I
takes
didn't want
f3.
to take with the knight. I don't know if it's better to take with the rook,
With the rook?
if it leads to better positions, but I do like. I guess you can just simply take on f3 and take on e4 and go to the same line.
I don't think this is going to help you very much.
It's just a knight instead of the rook there.
Yeah.
Right?
It's
You
not-
have knight d4, but then I can just take on b1, you take on b5, I take back on b5, and that's just going to be an equal endgame
Yeah, we just go home after this with the draw.
instantaneously.
So
Take with the knight, take with the rook on f3, take on e4, and this is the key position.
yeah, this is the key, right? Everything really boils down to this position. Very cool stuff here, this g5 move by Sevian. And
By the way, there is one way I see in which at the end I could be a pawn up. Now the question is how much compensation you're going to have as black. I'm going to start with rook to e1.
yeah, you can go rook e1. I have to take on f3.
You take on f3 and now bishop f4.
Yeah, but you cannot take on e6 and illustrate that because remember that this bishop is hanging. Bishop f4 actually picks up a pawn because you will at least do that. But the thing is, I go bishop d5, right?
Yes.
I think I
take
can
on
even go rook
c7.
c5, honestly. I'd rather you take e6 than c7.
Okay, I'll take on e6.
And I go rook c2.
Now take on a6.
And I don't really believe in this,
I'll
but
take as many pawns as I can.
yeah, you have some marginal winning chances here, right?
Take on c7. I have 2 pawns.
I don't, but you take on c7 here. Yeah, this is not so good. Maybe I do have to defend against the intrusion of the rook. Bishop takes, and
So
then
something happened. Okay, did he
No,
take on g5? I don't think he did.
I don't think it took. Maybe because of these variations, right? He's actually played the move a4.
Oh.
Wow! Wow!
We did not see that one coming.
That's a cool move, and you can find the explanation of this move down the lines that we went to, because in so many variations, the rook on b5 is perfectly hitting the bishop on g5, and it's also not on a dark square. Let me illustrate what I mean with that. In these positions, after the move knight takes f3, rook takes f3, rook takes f3, bishop takes e4, I would basically be winning if I can somehow move this bishop out of g5 attacking this rook, because this bishop on e4 can only take one of them. But I can't. I don't actually have a good way of doing so. If I play a4 now, the g5 bishop is simply hanging. So this doesn't help. And after the move a4, instead, Sam has to figure out what to do with the rook, or if he's going to sacrifice it. You could take on h4, I just don't believe in it. And the question is, where does this rook go, right? Because
well, we're going to let Sam think about this one, ponder his next decision, because we do have breaking news, Alejandro, and that is good for you and good for your student.
Excellent. I like good news for me.
Alimarandi seems to be taking over this game, and it seems like Hungaski might have blundered. This position we were mentioning, he had less than 5 minutes on the clock, is a very difficult position to defend, practically, because you are 2 pawns up, but unfortunately you don't have any development. You still lack safety for your king, and all your pieces are kind of splattered all over the board. So after queen to c4, e5 came on the board, and this is a very natural move, by the way, but it's already a mistake, because after knight to e4, a very good move, maneuvering this knight all the way to e6 towards e6. After I land on c5 or on d6, I'm also putting a lot of pressure on your weaknesses, specifically this pawn on b7. So right now, black has to be extremely careful. He played the move b6, which allows white to go rook to d1, and now we understand the idea of this move, queen to c4 as well. You cannot plug this open file with the move knight to d5, because after rook to d5, he can just simply resign on the spot. So what he did after rook to d1, he played the move b5, queen stays on the c file, once again not allowing the knight to return into the game, to return to the center via d5. And now we have rook to e8, rook to d6, and it seems like the position is just falling apart. Let's see, in the last 3-4 moves, well, black has created more weaknesses, while white improved the position of every single one of his pieces. The bishop became more active, because right now there's much more weaknesses with this pawn already on b5, much more dark square weaknesses. This pawn on c6 is going to fall. There's absolutely no way you can defend that. And you still have a lot of moves to make until you can get this rook involved into the game. First of all, knight to h6. This is the problem. The pawn on f6 is going to fall, and if the pawn on f6 falls, the position gets completely destroyed. So rook to d6, queen to f7, rook takes c6. I'm just simply going to continue picking up your weaknesses. Queen to d2, knight to e7, knight to d6, and to be honest, oh my goodness, look at this queen. Queen on g8, rook to h8, rook on e8, and the king on g7. Have you ever seen this type of setup?
No.
I think this is the first time I'm seeing this setup.
I think you resigned before you got to those setups.
And he did not resign. He still plays on, but the position is crumbling right now. Not only first of all, you finally managed to connect your knights, but unfortunately everything else is going to fall right now. I'm going to go rook to a6, pick up the pawn on a7. You just don't have enough time to stabilize the position. Not only that, but you're also down a lot of material. Resignable at this point. Hungaski is still fighting, but with 45 seconds and counting, a completely shattered position and 10 moves to make until he reaches the time control, I think this is going to be over in no time.
Yeah, this looks winning for JJ. Topsy-turvy game a topsy-turvy tournament, and that's honestly how he plays chess, right? He's very wild, and sometimes it goes well, and sometimes it goes badly. Let's take a look at the game between Antipov and Nieman, because this one also might be finishing relatively quickly. Hans Niemann has had also not the best tournament. I know that he wanted to come in winning, but Misha, he's not been able to find his form at all here in St. Louis. It's welcome to America going. But this one looks completely lost, and it's very simple. You count the pawns. This one is on f4. And more importantly, this king activity is absolute destruction. And this knight is coming from f5 to g3. You can throw in a check on f2, but all it's going to do is help me target your other pawn on h3. And remember that the moment this pawn lands on f3, you really could just resign. I mean, there's no saving this position.
This is game over.
This is game over, absolutely. There's no source of counterplay or anything like that in this position. And I didn't even notice, but the engine is saying that you can also take on b5 in certain variations. No, this one looks really bad. I'm not really sure where it went so downhill. It seems like the transition to the endgame, well, actually, this endgame looks pretty equal. Where did he go wrong? Maybe he just got outplayed in time pressure.
I think he just did.
Yeah, he must have.
And that is the problem. Let's look at the time right now. He only has 2 minutes and 25 seconds.
For 9 moves to make,
right?
yeah.
9 moves to make,
yeah, from
very difficult. And he takes this type of crazy decisions. For example, if you back track a couple of moves, Alejandro, d5, knight f5, c5. Why?
Yeah, it's a...
Why would you do this? Why wouldn't you play just some normal moves such as bishop to c3?
Yeah, bishop c3 check is very difficult.
Then put a pawn on b3, defend your structure,
right,
and then just play a normal game.
Yeah, it feels that he panicked, right? That his time was running low, he needed to do something. Perhaps he felt some strategical pressure because of the weaknesses on f3 and h3. I don't know, it's hard for me to say. I think after c5...
One of the patterns that I've seen from Misha Antipov, specifically in this event, he's getting slightly worse positions. I'm speaking about the game about him and Robson from a couple of rounds ago. Also with the white pieces, also in this type of structures, he got a slightly worse position, completely defendable,
yeah,
right? Mm-hmm. It looked like we're just a few moves away from shaking hands for a draw, but then slowly got pushed backwards, and then when push came to shove to defend the position, he was just simply unable to do so. He did not have the patience, and this is the key word right now. I feel Misha Antipov right now in his first tournament on American soil is lacking patience to defend difficult positions.
Yeah, this really does seem to be the case, as Nieman is playing very quickly. He's very well aware of how winning his position is in this case. And I think that we're going to see Misha resigning very soon. Sad start here for the Mizzou player, but it's just a very strong tournament. And even if you're a little bit off form, I mean, people are going to just try to beat you from every position.
These are sharks, and they're definitely smelling blood.
Right. No blood spilled in the Dariush game against Ilya Nizhnik. This game finished in a draw. Let me just get the final position. Not really sure how they got here. Probably also, let me just see the opening. Some kind of semi-slough. Let me see if there was anything particularly interesting about it. If not, we can move on. It feels that white got a little something, but it wasn't really all that interesting. Yeah, and the game didn't finish in a draw. So Dariush still on 50%, I believe. And Ilya still with a very good score. I think he's on +2 in this tournament. Let's look at the game of the day. Aram Hakobian against Ray Robson is still quite a fight, and it's going to be a fun fight for us specifically because a lot of these games have reached time control or are about to finish. But this one is far from. We have a position in which white has a little bit of a space advantage because of the positioning of some of his pieces. The knight on c4 is a little bit more advanced than the knight on c6, and these pawns give you more access to the center than black does. But it's still a symmetrical pawn structure. Black has his chances on the king side as well. And even though I would probably take the white side, I'm not really sure how strong his advantage is in this position. Yeah, you can see that a lot of the light squares are weak. The more I look at it, the more I'm realizing maybe white is actually a lot better than I thought he was. Because you can start improving with bishop e2. And the moment you trade this bishop for the one on e6, and I don't know if I want to do it now or later, But the moment I do that, it's very difficult to cover all of the light square weaknesses that black has saddled himself with on the king side, whereas white's light square weaknesses are difficult to reach. They're just not so easy to attack for any piece that's not the queen, but the queen has no support. The knights on c6 and e7 are very far from reaching some of these key squares.
That one seems to be a very deep strategical battle, but one that is going completely off the rails is the game between Dragoon Camille and Sam Sevian, because we left it off after a4. It felt like white is just simply taking over. It felt like this move was missed by black, and the computer actually agrees. White is completely winning, but there are still some complications that he needs to maneuver around. And after a4, g takes h4, a takes b5. Now you are getting this exchange, but at the same time black's pieces are invading your position. Knight to f3 came on the board. Of course you cannot take on f3 with the rook, because after queen to d1 you're going to lose the rook. After king to g2 I have the move h3, forcing the king off the path, off the defense of the rook on f3, and this is going to be big problems for you. Of course,
you know what the funny part is?
Yes.
I agree with you until I saw that the engine bar actually thinks white's winning in this position.
Yes, you're right. You're right. Actually, rook takes f3 might have been an option as well.
Actually, might have been the correct move.
One of the correct moves. So rook takes f3 is indeed one of the correct moves. That actually makes a lot of sense, because after queen to d1, yes, and now we see after h3, you take on h3, queen takes f3, and now you just go for the endgame.
You just go for the endgame. You take on f3, you take on f3, you take on a6.
Yep.
And the problem is that I am up.
You're going to take on e4, but now if we count the pawns, first of all, I am a pawn up, but I also have this incredibly dangerous close to promotion pawn all the way to a7. You're going to have to give a lot of resources to the defense of the promotion of the a pawn, and this is just a very difficult endgame for black. This
funny,
is kind of interesting that he decided against this line, because it also feels quite easy to calculate.
Yeah, the thing is, you calculate it out to knight f3, rook f3, queen d1 is forced. This is no surprise to anybody.
And it simplifies the position also.
Right. The thing is, you're up a.
Maybe rook takes f3 was something that he was afraid of.
I mean, you can certainly see how you can be afraid of this move, right? But you only need a couple more moves, because after queen here,
you cannot go on the dark squares.
Yeah, you cannot go to a dark square. But I'm going to force you into dark square. You don't have a choice. If you go there, queen h5, and again, you can go king g8. It's your only remaining light square, but I'm going to force you into a dark square with the move queen g6.
Either on h8 or on f8, and then either bishop to b2 or bishop to a3 is going to come with a check, and you're going to lose the queen. So yes, it seems like he missed a huge opportunity. Also, king to g2 was good too. King to g2 was fine as well, and this seems to be winning. After h3, just simply continue picking up your pawns, and it doesn't seem like you get enough compensation for all the material. Instead of that, he played this move king to h1, and he missed an incredible move, and that is the move rook to f5. Rook to f5. Now, do you understand? This move is aimed specifically at giving support for this knight to retreat all the way to g5, so that I can attack this pawn on e4. You cannot take. If you take knight to g5, you go king to g1, I go knight to h3, and that is a checkmate on the board. So rook to f5 was missed. Let's see what he played. Rook to f5 was played. Bishop to b2 came on the board. Makes a lot of sense.
That's a great move, rook f5, I have to say.
Knight to g5, rook takes f5. This is the current position on the board. We're probably going to see something along the lines of take on e4, king to g1.
You have to take on with the pawn, right?
On f5.
But this is a mess.
Keeping some pressure on this rook on b1. You don't have time to force the queen trade with queen to d4. First of all, also knight to f3 is coming on the board, so you have to go rook to c1. By the way, let's look at the clock. After bishop takes e4, we have 2 minutes and 30 seconds for a Dragoon, 3 minutes and 41 seconds for Sam Sevian. With Sam Sevian definitely on the attack.
Yeah, this is turning around.
12 more moves to go. 12 more moves to go. This is going to get wild. It's turning around, but it's also wild. Completely wild.
So let's take a look at some lines. Because takes, I was wondering if I could throw in the move queen c3, because it is a checkmate threat, I guess.
Yes.
You go check, king f1. queen d3 trades the queens and wins the rook. That's very unfortunate.
But this is probably the best solution that white has.
It's a draw at the end.
And you just go for a draw.
And do I have time to take on a6 probably?
No, because then I just retreat my knight, and then this bishop catches the pawn.
So you take on h3, and
I take.
And this became surprisingly boring.
You take, and then I'm going to put the bishop here. I'm going to catch your pawn, and there's no way to make any progress.
It actually just makes a trivial, silly draw.
Very easy draw.
Wow. Yeah. But finding this is actually kind of hard, because even after the move bishop b2, after the move e takes f5, you don't actually know if you're worse.
No.
Right?
No.
You might still think you're doing okay. And actually, Sam has not played the move ef5. That surprises me a little bit.
He started with knight h3.
Knight h3. The engine thinks it's horrible because...
Lost. Completely lost.
Because engines. So what's the difference? King f1 is the only move on the board.
Okay, so what if you take here? Now you go here.
I guess the difference is I don't have some kind of knight f3 trickeries.
Probably the knight was supposed to land on f3 in the previous variation. So let's try to understand that. If you take rook to c1, no, actually
Can you just go knight f3 anyway?
He wants to take on b5, the computer. If you go knight to f3, then no, you're just worse.
Fire this computer. I don't believe in it.
Get out of here.
Get
out of here, engine.
None of this makes any sense, but apparently here black has compensation, and we throw in the knight on h3, you don't.
So now this is the position we currently have on the board.
Okay.
Knight to h3, knight to h3, king to f1, bishop takes f5, keeping contact with the rook on b1. You have to do something about that. Probably you're going to go rook to c1, right?
I guess. I mean, I don't have that many other moves. I would be somewhat tempted to look at rook e1 instead.
Queen to d5 makes a lot of sense. You're getting ready to penetrate on this diagonal and potentially give the checkmate.
Oh man, I'm a little scared of both sides here.
And now he just takes on a6. Says, okay, I see a pawn, I'll take it. I don't believe you have any sort of checkmates. No, this is so scary. This looks so scary, Alejandro. If I would be looking at this position with how much time on the clock? 2 minutes and counting.
And the only thing I'm looking at is how to trade queens and make a draw.
Yes.
And we do see resignation by Misha Antipov against Hans Niemann. We did expect that one. Let's go back to the game in question.
Yeah, no, I mean, this one is wild. And in fact, maybe we can look on your board, because I do want to see these players right now. I want to see what their reaction is.
If we can get, I don't know if we have cameras on this specific board, but he's actually taking with the bishop on f5. To me,
there we have it.
To me, this is the more logical version. Like if you throw in knight h3, it's so you can go queen d5, right? And then if you're going to go queen d5, you're going to take with the bishop.
1 minute and 30 seconds and counting, and we see Camille.
I think
he's restless right now.
Sam feels that he has counterplay, you know.
Sam feels confident.
He sees
that queen on d5 coming.
There's a little psychological effect on this too, right? You're down to a minute, and you have the initiative here as black. You know that he's not going to be getting out of time pressure anytime soon. And you went from a lost position, I'm pretty sure Sam knew he was lost, to suddenly chances, right? You just don't know what's going on. In another game's result that we expected, JJ Alimarandi has defeated Robert Hungaski, jumps back to 50%. With the craziest bunch of 50% results possible. But let's keep up on this game.
Alejandro, but what do you do right now as white? Do you start calculating rook to c1 and allowing the queen to come to d5?
I mean, I would tell you what I wouldn't do.
What wouldn't you do?
I wouldn't leave this rook hanging.
He played king e1.
Yeah, but you can't take it.
You can.
Can you take it?
You can.
Let's look at that. So he's left the rook on b1 hanging, and we're wondering why you cannot take this. Okay, so go check.
King takes c6. King
okay, you definitely
f8.
cannot go this way.
No.
Because this one gets checkmated here on g7. So you have to go to f8. And here I mean, I could take on h3, but that's not what I'm looking for.
By the way, I don't think he took. I'm pretty sure he played queen to d5.
He played queen d5 anyway. But this looks like a worse version, right? Because I can get the rook to d1. Can I get the rook to d1?
No.
No, because queen h1 is made on c2 anyway.
Well, in fact, you can. You can. Yes,
all right, queen here, king d2,
king d2,
check. I'm not sure about the endgame after queen e2.
what else? You cannot go to c1. You get
Yeah,
checkmated
this
in
Queen
one
King
move.
C1 is checkmate, and this I assume just doesn't work, right?
Pick up either your bishop or your rook.
Probably the rook.
The rook. You don't have any checks.
So you take, you go Queen E2. Oh my god, so much to calculate. All right, I guess I take, and I go check. King goes somewhere. I'm assuming that this is too slow, but I don't know why yet. I guess I just take on A6, right? Yeah.
Huh.
So I guess you take on B5 here. Or do you take on D1? You take on D1. I have to take on D1. This pawn takes on, if you take on G3, then I take on A6, and this pawn promotes, and this one doesn't. Because the bishop just comes back to the defense, right?
Yes.
Yes. So you can't actually play HG, but you can play AB. And then I guess you take, right? Why not? But this is winning for black.
Is it?
I mean, I'm up 2 pawns.
That's a lot of pawns.
That's a lot of pawns, right? I stick a knight on D5 and bring the king,
Should
and that
be
should be easily
win.
winning, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
He played rook c1, so
Okay,
none
maybe
of this is going to
maybe
happen.
because of that he played rook c1. That way there's no skewer on g4. What a mess. I think you have to take the time to take on b5, right?
Just like that.
Well, the problem with these lines, right?
Now
is
I
that
can go on c3.
I can also go queen e2, and since you don't pick up the rook. I mean, I'm at least okay, though. Maybe I should be playing for a win with king c3, yeah. I don't know.
What a complete mess.
And if I take here, white surprisingly has 0 checks.
No, but I feel I have to... No, but I don't have a way to get my knight involved into play, because whenever I go knight to f2, you go queen to g5.
Yeah, this knight is actually doing an important job on h3, which is to hold the g5 square. So here, queen g5 check. We don't really know how strong this is, but it feels that if you lose this coordination for one move, that you will get in trouble. So rook c1 is played. Let's just put that on the current position on the board. Rook c1 played, and this position is just a mess. I really don't know. What's the time situation here? 41 seconds for Dragoon.
And 1 minute and 20 seconds and counting for Sam Sevian, and a lot of very difficult decisions ahead for both of these players.
For both sides. This is such a difficult position to play.
Both of these players have very, very difficult
It's
decisions.
kind of amazing
right
that they left themselves so little time to play such a complex situation. And we have with us a victor of today's round, JJ Alimarandi, but we're going to have him analyze this position with us because we're running out of time and we don't want to break the flow of the game. But JJ, welcome to the studio. Congrats on your win. A very topsy-turvy game. Topsy-turvy tournament, I would say.
Yes, definitely.
But nice to pick up a win. Tell us your first instinct on what's going on here in the position on the board. A takes b5, boom.
That was played, yeah?
Yeah.
Wow.
And g takes h4.
Yeah, it looks very unclear, but
Well, the question
don't
is
know.
right now, is the white king getting checkmated?
Is the black king getting checkmated?
That is also a very good question.
let's say it's equal, yeah? That's the practical answer. It's
practical-
always equal.
Is this what I teach you?
By the way, you are definitely correct, because the
This is
engine
what I
just-
teach them.
The engine says 0, 0, 0, 0, 0.
I mean, when both sides don't have time, these positions can get super complicated. Like yesterday, I was hoping for something like this, and I was actually lost. So, and I thought it could be double-edged. And if the engine is giving zeros, I guess it can go either way.
But so it's equal objectively, but who has the better side of equality right now is the question. From my perspective, is white, because right now it doesn't feel like you have a good way to create anything around my king. I really like this move, g takes h4, by the way.
Yeah, it's a very practical move, right? You just get rid of hg forever, but more importantly, it gives the g3 square to this queen, and suddenly you can imagine many variations in which queen g3, queen g7 will be devastating. I actually haven't seen which lines, but actually queen g3 is a devastating threat because king f8, I have bishop a3, and I think I start giving you checkmate. And I assume that if you ever have to interpose the bishop, that it's not actually on its ideal diagonal. Although who knows, maybe it is.
Okay, so right now I guess we should go with queen to h1.
Played, king d2, queen h2.
And now if you go to c3, I'm going to take advantage of the fact that you, in fact, took on h4 and opened up that diagonal. So now my queen on h2 supports this retreat with the knight to f4.
So if you want to go queen e2, knight f4, you mean? Sorry.
No. If you go queen to e2, I'm going to start looking for some extra checks. Maybe queen to d6.
Queen d6 maybe, yeah. No, this is really weird because I actually feel I'm getting kind of mated here, but...
So if you go king to c3, I think b4, right?
You know, I was thinking this is checkmate, but then I realized it wasn't. And I actually don't see it at all.
Knight f4 maybe.
Knight f4, maybe you just bring the other piece to the attack. I like
Bishop
this move
d3,
a lot.
yeah.
The bishop is going to d3.
Yeah, this is over.
Yeah. So king c3 on the board. This is the current position.
Does he have b4 here? And then queen b2?
Does he have b... That's a very good question, right? b4 check. You might as well take. What else?
Well, he definitely has that, and the question is, does white has
like rook
enough
takes
competition
c7
after
here or
rook takes
something?
c7? Yeah, there's no more check.
This is your only chance, right? There's no check on the g file. This check doesn't really help me because queen g7 at the very least. Maybe bishop g4 is also good. But rook takes c7, and...
What a mess.
And the evaluation hasn't really changed. Yeah, the evaluation is, this is a mess. and we continue. He actually didn't play b4. He actually just brought the knight back.
Also makes sense, but allows queen g1.
Yeah, it does allow queen g1 with the simplification.
Take it.
I think you have to take it, right?
Take the queen trade.
I think you have to take the queen trade. I mean, this king is just becoming a bit too vulnerable. The knight is finally joining the fray with the move knight d5, check on the next move.
By the way, knight to f4 was played with 3 seconds on the clock. So, again, big decisions, you need to allow yourself to have more time on the clock. That's the practical
And I think the lower this gets on time, the more likely you are to play queen g1. And
play queen g1.
Yeah.
You
I'm
have
almost sure he'll play queen g1. He has to, right?
Yeah, I think, queen g1 played. Takes, you have to take, and I guess you take. And you still have a few moves to make time control, but there's no real danger here for white at all. The minor piece is not going to mate you. The question is, do you have winning chances here?
Well, the position got simplified. We're going to let the players think about this one. I'm sure they're going to reach time control without any problems. But JJ, let's go into your game because you saw this Scandinavian on the board and you immediately launched an attack with b4. Was that preparation or like?
No, honestly, I was just in the mood to play some gambits today.
The usual move.
Regardless of what opening it was. And when he played the Scandinavian, I was a little annoyed that I didn't get what I wanted. So I was like, okay, let's just at least have some fun and play b4.
Okay, now tell me, did Alejandro teach you this?
I would never teach such moves.
I mean, it was an over-the-board decision, to be honest. Because I was like, if I play the main lines, it's going to be boring, so I'll just at least have some fun.
Let's go for the kill. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it seems you got everything you wanted out of the opening.
And g6, I don't understand. Like, maybe it makes sense, but to me, it was a bit awkward. But
yeah, and it seems like you got almost a winning position.
Also, f6 was shocking. But like, I don't know if I had something better. I think I played like king h1, queen e2. It was a bit too slow. Probably makes not much sense, but I don't know. I thought it was safe to play king h1.
Actually, this is a very nice win, but bishop g8 is winning. I know that you never look at these moves.
I looked at it, I just didn't see how it wins.
Because you have to take with the king, right?
Yes.
If you take with the rook...
Then you have bishop h6 and then...
If king f7, knight g5, right?
Yeah.
And if king e8, knight d6.
Knight d6, yeah.
So, what happens if you take with the king in this position?
Yeah, I don't know. I couldn't see it. So I was like, if I don't see it, I shouldn't give up my light squared bishop.
I'm just going to cheat.
Yes, please.
Yeah, engine says bishop h6 plus 6.
Bishop h6.
Right.
I mean, yeah, but like, how do you guarantee it during a game, I guess?
Yeah.
It makes sense, yes, when you know it when it's plus 6.
Yeah, I guess black has no moves here, right?
Just paralyzes
It's
completely.
paralyzed completely. And even this doesn't help you.
And I guess the key point is that if you go queen to h5, you have knight takes f6, or?
Oh, this is nice.
Yeah, this is nice. Yeah, you just, even if you take and you take, your black is
if
just
I
lost.
saw this, I would play it for sure.
Yeah, and if you play king takes here and here, as Cristian was mentioning, then knight f6. It's a pretty nice line. Black's getting pretty much mated in every variation.
Does he?
Yeah, this is checkmate for sure.
And if he takes with the pawn?
And if you take with the pawn, then I think you just go check.
Pick up the rook and
Pick up
just
the
win that
rook.
position.
And then you take on b7 at the end. Although you have
I
queen
can
e3.
take on c8 now.
And you can take on c8, yeah. And just win a rook. You can take on c8 and just win a rook, and at least a rook, and call it a day. Yeah,
But-
that would have been nice.
I could have been done like 2 hours ago.
Right, but yeah. But you wouldn't be here with us in the studio, so that's why you took your sweet time.
Yeah,
And
well, I mean, I was thinking these moves were logical, but apparently not. So
logic goes out the window when you talk to computers.
yeah.
When were you absolutely sure that you were winning?
Pretty much never until the last move, I think.
Well,
Like he was getting low on time, so I knew he was gonna blunder something. And then around here, I thought I was having sufficient counterplay for like the 2 pawns, and I was confident he was gonna blunder. He had no time, so.
and he did blunder, but yeah,
Not the best technique, but I mean, with no time, also, I probably don't need the best technique. Just
Yeah.
wanted to be practical, and that's it.
Well, certainly a nice victory. How do you rate your tournament so far?
I mean, it has a lot of ups and downs. I'm not like super happy about it, but also like at least I'm playing some fun chess, so it's entertaining at least.
Some fun chess for sure. Well, thank you for joining us, JJ. Certainly a fun game to watch. It did keep us captivated for the better part of half an hour here in the studio as soon as we started the program. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on. We have some results in the B group as Ilya Nishnik did draw Darius Schwirtz, Alex Lunderman drew Jeffrey Xiong, Hans Niemann did
Defeat
defeated
Misha
Misha
Antipov.
Antipov.
And actually, I think we're going to have Hans for an interview in just a second.
Oh, very good. We haven't talked to him here enough. And
We
meanwhile, in
haven't
the
talked
other
to him
games,
at all on the show.
that's true. We also have the game between Aram Hakobian and Ray Robson, in which White could say they still have a minuscule pool because of the space and yada yada, but you expect this to end in a draw almost always. And we have this titanic battle between Camille Dragoon and Sam Sevian.
And I think they reached time control.
They reached
right?
time control. It feels pretty drawish, but
It's definitely White who's
it's White
having
who's
a pretty
trying,
decent
right?
pool.
And perhaps in a practical game you do lose this once in a while.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, actually, perhaps more than once in a while. But somebody that must be thrilled with their performance today is Hans Niemann, who defeated Misha Antipov with the black pieces.
Hans, welcome to the studio. Tell us a little bit about your tournament so far. Topsy-turvy, you started off with a very exciting game against Ray Robson. You were winning, then you were losing, then it ended up in a draw. Then you won a game, then you lost a game, and now you finally won with the black pieces. Tell us a little bit about your tournament and how you assess it.
I think it's a pretty bad event from a result perspective, but I think that the results have not been reflective of my play. I think, as you mentioned, in a few specific critical moments, things sort of didn't go my way. Like in this Robson game, I in time pressure missed a win, and in a few other games, some results have flipped. So I think I've actually been playing very well. I'm very happy with my play. I'm just not that happy with how I've managed my nerves in the critical moments. But I think in general, I've shown pretty good chess, especially today and against my win against Lunderman as well.
Absolutely. Today was a very clinical performance, especially in the end game. Let's take a look at that game. When did you feel like your opponent is starting to err?
That's a very fancy vocabulary word, Cristian. I'm glad that you've been studying. Almost couldn't understand that one.
UTD education right there.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
well,
sir.
but you know where you can get a better education than UTD?
At Mizzou.
At Mizzou, you know?
Yes.
I'm sitting right here.
You see?
You know?
Hans knows. Hans knows.
Yeah. However, if you are ambitious about your chess, stay away from college. I'll put that last thing in. Anyways, yeah. So I had this. I see they got this D5 idea. This was a nice little opening tidbit, but when I had like 50 minutes against 30 seconds in a much better position, I started to feel that he went wrong. But yeah, I think this opening idea was actually played. It was actually for the first time, or in the second time actually, it was in a classical game was played Dragoon against Robson, and he won that game and he showed this idea. But this is like so I prepared for this game, I assume that he was sort of aware of it because of following the other games, but he didn't really react properly here. And in relation to the other game, I'm going to nerd out here. Some people might just think I'm not might not get this, but in this position, with the bishop on b5 and the rook on fa is transposing to the game. So here, this is sort of we were debating after the game whether it's an improvement. But having the rook in e8, I thought it was an improvement, especially after he took and played knight e3, which is not really the most precise. So after bishop takes, there's the same position in the Robson game, but the rook was in f8, the bishop was in b5. So from a logical perspective, one can conclude that the rook on e8 is good. I guess he disagreed, but I thought that this is just a fine improvement. So this was certainly winning the opening battle, and then I think it was a clinical positional game after that. Yeah, you can go through it, but yeah. So here, yeah, so this is queen d5, knight d7. This is I saw this move and I was like, did I blunder? And then I realized, queen b3, ab3, there's queen b3, I have king f7. So this position, king f7 takes, king f6 was just really interesting because it looks like white could be better because there's some weird tension and some concrete issues with the weak c7 pawn, and also there's to defend this pawn. There's also the f3 break, and then if you defend rook e7 like I put it again, there's this b4 break. So a lot of nuances and weird ideas here. But I think the most important thing that you didn't really understand is that if I play the move g5, he's just never going to be better. After rook e7, b4, g5, bishop d2, rook e8, I've sort of gotten rid of these concrete issues, and now I'm ready to just play on the king side. And from all general perspectives, my king is very good. His king is bad. My position can improve much more than his can with just extending on the king side. So it's not really clear. He's just a bit too weak. So yeah, this is where things I started to feel optimistic. So okay, b5, knight e7, c4, f4. No, I didn't play f4. I can't even remember.
b6, d5, and
b6.
Yes.
Right
now you played f4.
Thank you. Yes. Now, okay,
Never mind.
Yeah. So before this is another. So here, if you go back before f3, this is where Okay. So if I remember, he had 50 minutes. After 53, he has 6, and if he doesn't play f3, he can sort of wait, and he's probably not lost, but he's just going to get slowly squeezed, as Hikaru says, just like squeezing some orange juice, and
pineapple juice.
Pineapple juice, and just you guys are streaming on Twitch. I gotta get some clips for you so you guys can boost your viewership and get the Hikaru watching the stream. I'm doing you guys a favor right here, Just even mentioning Hikaru will get you a lot more viewers. I know you guys have been waiting for me just to come on and do this interview because you just needed some content, So I will give you your value.
There we go.
He could have just. So this is a thing where he gets low on time and he's like, okay, we gotta go. He just starts blitzing and going for really risky stuff, and then everything just collapsed. So I can, if there's a critical moment, I will stop. Yeah. So c5, knight d4. Okay. Yeah. So am I lost here is the question, because so here I made a little bit of a calculated risk. I was like, this guy's got 2 minutes. I see what he should do, but I just don't think he's gonna do it with that much on the clock. So after rook e8.
He's supposed to take on b6 or what?
Yeah, takes on b6.
Knight f3.
Knight f3, and I was like, if he plays this with 2 minutes on the clock,
king h1 maybe.
I submit.
King h1
yeah, king h1, rook e2, rook e2.
Or
rook e2 gets mated.
So king f2, I calculated king f2, king g2 as well, and I was like, okay, takes on b6.
c7, I guess.
And then I was like, okay, knight c4. And rook c8.
Rook c1.
Rook c1, rook c1. Knight d6. And apparently, after b6, maybe I'm just lost.
Good calculation there.
So I was like, I saw this, but I was like, nah, he's not going to play. And I saw this in maybe 15 seconds, but I was like, just no, he's just not going to play. So I was like, I think I'm just lost, yeah?
No, but rook c8.
I don't really know why you're lost, but I'm going to pretend that.
Rook c8, rook e1?
Rook e1.
Rook e1.
You know what? It's
and
just
now knight b7.
Knight b7, yeah. And then rook.
It does look a bit dangerous.
Okay, maybe I'm not lost. My calculation wasn't really in the best. my conclusion was, there's no way, and if I lose this, I lose this. But if I don't go for this, I'm not going to win the game, you know? So you got to risk it for the biscuit, you know? Have you learned that phrase, Cristian?
I know that one. I know that one. Yeah.
You have? Okay. Okay. So, you know, he didn't go for this.
Yeah, I'm cheating a little bit, but it is precisely because he has to go to either F2 or G2, and G2 is slightly worse because it allows rook E2 later. Is that you actually have this check on E4 instead of going through C4, and this is apparently an important tempo because, well, the B6 doesn't come with a threat. So you could
After B6, what do I play?
B6 it's not, it says 0.8 after rook.
Rook E3, rook E3. Oh, rook E3, rook B3.
And
Okay.
you get behind the pawns.
So, you know, my instinct was, you know, just full send, you know, if you're a fan of the Nelk Boys, which I don't think any of you guys.
So much culture in
I mean,
this guy is coming with-
Amazon Prime culture, yeah.
You know, I just think you should just full send it for the boys, eh?
Full send it for the boys.
Yeah,
My
you know,
God, I have never felt so old like I feel right now.
I am just trying to help you guys get more viewers, you know. I'm a nice guy. I'm a
Alejandro,
former streamer.
you've never had a happy dad?
Oh, the Happy Dads. You know, if I was old enough, I'd be drinking Happy Dads.
Alejandro is completely lost.
It doesn't
We lost the coverage.
We've lost Alejandro.
We lost it. We made it to day 7 without going crazy, but this is the end, guys. We are finito. We are done. All right, Hans, good job. Good win. Good stuff. Bravo.
Thank you. Also, please look at the logos. Yeah, there we go. If I'm farming content, yeah. Shout out to my sponsors, Chessable and Chess24.
Excellent. Chess24, great company. And are you going to be working for them anytime soon?
Yeah, I'm a brand ambassador. You know, I am doing some streaming for them. I'll be playing in the next tour event, I believe. So, doing some streaming, promotional stuff, growing the beautiful game of chess, and, you know, in a cool, stylish way with weird shirts and buzz cuts.
Yeah, that's
for the boys.
Yeah,
For the boys.
LeBron was doing that before you. All right. Thank you, Hans, for joining us. Always an entertaining character. Certainly with a topsy-turvy tournament. And let's try to finish up on what's going on with today's round. All right. We have Ray Robson against Aram Hakobian. As I mentioned, white is better in this position, but it's apparently better than I thought initially. I actually thought that white has to be better in this position. Let me explain a little bit why. This knight's on e3 and c4 control a lot of squares. This knight's on c6 and e7 are a bit awkward. And you can see also that there are some weaknesses on the light squares around the black's king. That being said, symmetrical pawn structure, not that many weaknesses to attack. I really expected this to be more equal than apparently it is. Because even after only a few moves, the engine really does not like black's position. And I think that white has very good chances to actually keep improving his position with the knights, specifically the knight on here, coming to here, and maybe g4, knight f5, force you to take and then target the pawn on g7. Originally, I wasn't sure that's going to be enough to win because you don't really want to trade one knight when you have this much space. But perhaps it's more dangerous than I thought. Cristian, more updates.
No, absolutely. That one definitely feels, at least from a practical perspective, quite dangerous for black because of the lack of space. But one game that seems to be going white's direction is the one between Kamil Dragun and Sam Sevian, which we were having our eyes on. And we were saying at this point that, at least from a practical perspective, it seems like black is going to have a very difficult defense ahead of himself, and that is exactly what is happening because bishop to f3 came on the board, rook to c5, b4, and right now this pawn is going to be lost. You have to focus as black on ways to find a counterplay on the king side given to you by the h pawn, and this is exactly what he's doing. Rook to c4, knight to g6, rook takes b4. I'm looking at this position, I'm seeing this pass pawn on the b file. The rook is great. I'm going to be able to potentially hold on to this pawn with my bishop landing on e5 potentially. I think white has great chances to win this one. So this one, I'm going to give it to Dragun. Let's see what's happening in the B group because the big clash between the tournament leader, Chris Repka, and Christopher Yu seems to be going as it was an hour ago as well, Christopher's way. But I feel he did have some better options at one point. So let's see. I think we left it somewhere around here. When this knight landed on g4 and it was ready to go to e3, which in fact happened, we saw this position, and now black has all the time in the world to create his attack, potentially double up on the e-file and then start pushing his pawns on the queen side. What white is lacking at this point in the game is any sort of counterplay. You cannot try to open up the position on the king side because that's just going to help black. You cannot open the position on the queen side because, well, the structure just doesn't allow you to do so. This pawn on a5 coupled with the action of the bishop on b4 is just keeping the position very compact on this side, and this one is not looking great for white. Let's see what happened. Queen to f6. Bishop to h3, you see white is just trying to find moves and he just doesn't have a lot of them. King to h1, king to g1, and black has a lot of ways in which he can improve his position, and this is exactly what we see. b6, queen to c6, rook to e6, queen to d7, some desperation, but the lonely queen cannot do much. I have so much firepower with my queen on f6, the rook's doubled up on the e-file, and this is the key piece in the position, the knight on e3, which gives black a tremendous advantage. And right now h4, rook to f4, rook to d6, we have this position. H takes g3 is on the board. I'm seeing this queen potentially landing on e5, putting even more pressure on a white's pawn structure. If you have to go rook to f4, I mean, your pieces are so passive as white. All I have to do is figure out a way to include this bishop into the attack. All of black's pieces are included into the attack except the bishop on b4. If I manage to put it on d6 and put some pressure on this diagonal, target this rook on f4 as well as the weakness on g3, well, your position is going to collapse. So this is the only plan that I have as black in the position. This is what I should be focusing on. Specifically for that reason, probably rook to f6 just seems to be winning this game. Of course, white is going to have to find some sort of counter chances related to the idea of bishop to d5. The queen is already on a8, potentially trying to target the king via the g8 square. So let's wait and see, but it definitely seems to be going Christopher's way. 19 minutes on the clock for him, 29 minutes for Chris Repka. This one is going to go down to the wire, but it seems like maybe the leader of the B group might go down in this round. Alejandro.
Still a lot to play for, I think. If you are a fan of Chris Repka, don't worry, there's still plenty of hope there. Let me take a look at what happened in the Mishra game against Alshan Mouridabadi. In that game, we thought that black had a terrible position, but somehow Alshan put up incredible defense, and kudos to him, finding a lot of important moves, including this move b5, which the more we saw it, the less we liked it, but the engines thought it was absolutely fine for black. And so did Alshan, apparently, going into this position. And actually, the very clever move, bishop e7 in this position, instead of something else we were looking at, I think knight f6. And the point is that if you take with the bishop on b5, I think I will have the resource of bishop d8 in this position, where the bishop is attacking the rook, and it's the only defender of the bishop on b5. And this will force these simplifications, which again, a little bit surprisingly to me, don't really lead anywhere. But remember that black is temporarily up, it's not up a pawn, but will regain one of these pawns on b4 or d5, so you actually have to take something. But you can only take one thing, either on h7 or to d6. And in either case, it seems that black is doing actually just fine. And so bishop e7 is perhaps a very clever practical move, even though the engine thinks knight f6 is more precise. And we got into this position, kind of chaotic with low time for both sides, where white needs to advance the pawn to g3 and move the king to g2 because this rook is very annoying on the first rank. G6, rook a7 was played, knight f6, and somehow, black got real counterplay, and it went for the immediate move e4. A pretty committal 41st move, but at this point you already had plenty of time to think about it. He actually thought like 30 minutes on this move. And after the move f takes e4, I expect to move f3. I don't see why else you ever do this. I'm surprised it's not on the board, honestly. F3, king takes f3, rook takes f1, where you're up a piece. But I'm not sure who's playing for a win, because you have this annoying move e5. You could keep your pieces with knight e8, I think, but you really don't want to be playing that. You want to take on d5, I think. You take here, rook b1. And I think this might also more or less fizzle out to a draw. Although white is on the better side of it.
So you take on e7 right now.
I think the clever move is to play b6. Because if you take on e7, I don't take the pawn on e7 and leave this one alive. I actually take on b5. And I don't think you ever defend this successfully.
Yeah, bishop to h4
I mean, you can play
is
bishop
the only
h4,
way, but
I have rook b4, I start attacking the bishop, I start getting behind the pawn. I could even go like rook b3, rook e3. I think that tactically works.
Maybe rook b3, rook e3 is even better.
Yeah. I think at this point it's just a choice of...
So it seems probably we're going to have something along the lines of white goes e8, picks up the pawn on h7, and we're going to play rook and bishop and a pawn against rook and knight, which is probably going to be a technical draw.
Right, and so just to point out that the only line that really does scare me is this one with b6. You don't actually give up the piece immediately. You don't take the piece immediately, and the point is that I defend my pawn, and if you take with the knight, this is a check. Suddenly this is a check, and that rook returns to b7.
That one is dangerous.
And I think this is just winning. So perhaps still some work to be done by Elshen, who's maybe realizing that the position is not so easy. And kudos again to Mishra, because this sequence of fe4, if you saw all the way to e5 and d6, it's a really, really nice sequence.
And by the way, of course, Morad Yabadi has other options as well. As you were mentioning, knight to e8 to preserve the knight. He needs to calculate.
He needs to calculate pretty accurately in this position. I think it's a tall order.
Well, Alejandro, another very exciting round, another very exciting interview. We have to get Hans on the show a bit more often. We're going to expand our viewership with all these cultural references.
I do like how he threw both Chess24 and Hikaru at us.
Yeah,
like, here, have the entirety of the chess world, everybody.
Have it all, boys. But yes, let's see where we stand in this round. Round number 7, a very important round for the standings. 3 games have finished in the A group. We have Hans, who won a very important game against Misha Antipov, who is just simply struggling in this event. Jeffrey Shong against Alex Lenderman, and Darius Zvierch versus Ilya Nishnik have finished in a draw. And how about the B group, Alejandro?
In the B group, we have more games to be played. Ali Morandi beating Hungaski is the only result we have so far, and everything else is actually kind of up in the air. Just very quickly going to say that Raja Harshid, I think, is a favorite to draw against Sam Khanin, but it's certainly Sam.
A lot of work to do.
Yeah, a lot of work to do. Sam is certainly the favorite there. And I think the same can be said about this game between Arman Mikhailian with the black pieces, who's pushing against Titus Stramavicius, but we also think it's closer to a draw. No, I'm not so sure about that one. And as we expected, Mishra to play against Elshen Moriyabadi for quite a while, and Chris Repka with an uncomfortable defense, but so far he's still holding on against Christopher Yu.
Well, Alejandro, penultimate round tomorrow. We are getting closer and closer to the culmination of this event. I'm very excited. It's going to be an exciting round. Don't forget, join us on YouTube and Twitch for this broadcast. The games start at 1 p.m. Central Time. Our show is going to start at 3:30 p.m. Central Time. At the same place, at the same time, tomorrow. Also, you can reach us on social media at #SpringChessClassic. Until tomorrow, I'm Grandmaster Cristian Chirila with Grandmaster Alejandro Ramirez, and we will be seeing you guys tomorrow.
Please join us, and we'll see you tomorrow at 3:30.
This has been a presentation of the St. Louis Chess Club. Any reproduction or distribution of this content without the express written consent of the St. Louis Chess Club is prohibited.